WWE currently finds itself in a troubling creative crossroads, and what I'm about to reveal will shock even the most loyal fans. At the center of this crisis is Triple H, the man many once hailed as the savior of WWE's future. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit: the King of Kings might be destroying the very company he was meant to save. When Triple H took over creative control following Vince McMahon's controversial exit, fans erupted with hope. Finally, we thought, someone who understood wrestling would break WWE free from the repetitive patterns that had plagued the product for years. The early signs were promising: beloved superstars returned, wrestling took center stage, and storylines seemed more coherent. But here's what nobody saw coming: that initial success was just a mirage. What I'm about to show you isn't just criticism, it's a comprehensive breakdown of how Triple H's leadership has systematically dismantled WWE's creative foundation. By the end of this video, you'll understand why WWE's current direction isn't just disappointing, it's dangerous for the company's future. And trust me, the evidence is more damning than you think. Let me tell you about the most fundamental problem plaguing WWE under Triple H's creative control, and it's not what you think. Everyone talks about his long-term storytelling, but here's the brutal reality: Triple H doesn't know how to end a story when it matters most. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you watched a WWE storyline start with incredible promise, only to watch it drag on for months until you stop caring? This isn't a coincidence, it's a systematic failure of creative vision. Triple H has fallen into the trap of believing that longer automatically means better, but that's like saying a movie is better just because it's 3 hours long. The Bloodline saga is the perfect example of this creative catastrophe. What was once the crown jewel of WWE storytelling, a masterpiece of family drama, betrayal, and championship prestige, has devolved into an exhausting loop of recycled outcomes. Roman Reigns, the supposed centerpiece, barely appears anymore. The family dynamics that once felt fresh and compelling now feel forced and repetitive. But here's what's really happening behind the scenes: Triple H is terrified of ending stories at their peak because he doesn't trust his ability to create something equally compelling afterward. So instead of delivering satisfying conclusions when audiences are most invested, he stretches narratives until the emotional resonance dies a slow, painful death. This approach reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of audience psychology. Wrestling fans don't just want long stories, they want stories that feel like they're building towards something meaningful. When you promise a destination but keep taking detours, people eventually stop following the map. The most frustrating part? Triple H has all the tools to succeed. WWE's roster is incredibly talented, the production values are higher than ever, and fans are desperate for compelling content. Yet week after week, we get storylines that meander without purpose, characters who repeat the same motivations, and feuds that feel like they exist simply to fill television time. Consider how this affects the wrestlers themselves. Imagine being a performer who's given a compelling character arc, only to watch it get stretched beyond recognition because creative doesn't know when to pull the trigger. That's not just bad for the audience, it's devastating for talent morale and character development. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires something Triple H seems unwilling to embrace: creative courage. Great storytelling requires knowing when to end things, even when they're successful. It means trusting that you can create something new and exciting rather than milking existing storylines until they're completely drained of impact. Until Triple H learns this fundamental lesson about narrative structure, WWE will continue to frustrate fans with stories that start strong but finish weak. And in an entertainment landscape where audiences have countless alternatives, that's a luxury WWE simply cannot afford. Now let's talk about something that should make every WWE fan absolutely furious: the systematic misuse of incredible talent under Triple H's leadership. What I'm about to reveal shows just how badly creative decisions are being made backstage, and it explains why so many promising careers are stalling. Here's a question that should haunt Triple H every night: How do you take a roster packed with world-class athletes and somehow make them feel ordinary? The answer lies in his fundamentally flawed approach to talent development and utilization. Let's start with Jey Uso's solo run, a masterclass in how to destroy momentum through overexposure. Initially, fans were excited to see Jey step out of his brother's shadow and establish his own identity. The potential was enormous. But what happened next perfectly illustrates Triple H's biggest weakness. He doesn't understand the difference between pushing someone and overexposing them. Jey was immediately thrust into main event scenarios without the character development necessary to sustain that level of spotlight. His promo work, while passionate, lacked the depth and nuance required for a top-tier singles competitor. Instead of recognizing this and allowing Jey to develop organically, Triple H doubled down, giving him more screen time and bigger matches. The result? Fans began to turn on a performer they initially supported, not because Jey lacked talent, but because creative failed to present him properly. But here's where it gets even more frustrating. While Jey was being overexposed, genuinely overperformers like LA Knight were being criminally underutilized. Knight had lightning in a bottle during 2023, organic crowd reactions, natural charisma, and the kind of authentic connection with audiences that money can't buy. This should have been a no-brainer push, right? Wrong! Triple H's cautious, overthinking approach killed Knight's momentum dead. Instead of striking while the iron was hot, creative hesitated, second-guessed, and ultimately wasted what could have been WWE's next breakout babyface star. This wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was creative malpractice. The pattern becomes even clearer when you look at other examples. Austin Theory, once positioned as a future world champion, has stagnated completely under Triple H's booking. Braun Breaker, who dominated NXT with his intensity and athleticism, has been mishandled with directionless feuds and inconsistent character work. Grayson Waller, a naturally gifted heel with excellent mic skills, has been relegated to comedic segments instead of meaningful storylines. What's happening here isn't random, it's systematic. Triple H seems to lack the instinct for recognizing when talent is ready for the next level, and more importantly, he doesn't seem to trust organic audience reactions. Instead of capitalizing on natural momentum, he appears to prefer manufactured pushes based on backstage politics or personal preferences. This approach is devastating for multiple reasons. First, it wastes the prime years of talented performers who could be drawing money and creating memorable moments. Second, it frustrates audiences who can see the potential being squandered. Third, it creates a locker room environment where talent doesn't know what they need to do to succeed, because success seems disconnected from performance or fan reaction. The most damning part? WWE has never had a deeper, more talented roster, yet somehow feels less star power than ever. Here's something that should embarrass Triple H and everyone in WWE's creative department: the systematic neglect of the women's division under his leadership. And before anyone tries to defend this with token examples, let me break down exactly how badly this division is being mismanaged. Yes, Rhea Ripley has had strong showings. Yes, a few other women have received decent treatment. But using a handful of success stories to mask the broader failure is like pointing to one good meal at a restaurant while ignoring that everything else on the menu is terrible. The women's division as a whole lacks the consistent storytelling, character investment, and creative attention that the men's divisions receive as standard. Let's talk about what consistent storytelling actually means, because this is where Triple H's failure becomes most obvious. In the men's divisions, feuds are built through weeks or months of character development, personal stakes, and escalating tension. Wrestlers have clear motivations, their conflicts feel organic, and their matches feel like the culmination of genuine animosity or competition. Now compare that to the women's division, where feuds are routinely built around repetitive promos that could be copy and pasted between different performers. How many times have we seen women's storylines revolve around generic respect angles or lazy interference finishes that do nothing to elevate either competitor? It's creative bankruptcy disguised as programming. The talent being wasted is staggering. Shayna Baszler, a legitimate fighter with an intimidating presence and unique skill set, is consistently underused despite having everything needed to be a dominant heel champion. Piper Niven brings intensity and athleticism that could anchor compelling storylines, yet she's treated as an afterthought. Alba Fyre has the charisma and in-ring ability to be a major player, but creative seems to have no idea how to utilize her effectively. Meanwhile, the championship picture feels completely arbitrary. Titles are passed around without any effort to elevate the overall division or create meaningful hierarchies. When was the last time a women's championship match felt like a must-see event rather than just another segment to fill television time? When did you last see a women's feud that had you genuinely invested in the outcome? This isn't just about equality, though that's certainly part of it. This is about basic creative competence. The women's roster is packed with talented performers who could be creating memorable moments and drawing audience investment, but they're being failed by a creative system that treats them as secondary priorities. The most insulting part is how obvious the disparity becomes when you watch the shows. Men's segments receive careful attention to pacing, character development, and story progression. Women's segments often feel rushed, underdeveloped, or designed simply to check a diversity box rather than create compelling television. Here's what makes this even more frustrating. WWE has proven it can book women's wrestling effectively. The Four Horsewomen era, the rise of Becky Lynch, and various NXT women's storylines have shown that when creative actually tries, women's wrestling can be just as compelling as anything else on the show. The failure to maintain that standard under Triple H isn't just disappointing, it's a waste of talent, money, and audience engagement that WWE can't afford in today's competitive entertainment landscape. Let me tell you about one of Triple H's most embarrassing failures, and it perfectly illustrates why his creative instincts are fundamentally flawed. When he took over, one of his first major moves was bringing back numerous stars who had been released during the McMahon era. On paper, this seemed like a brilliant strategy. In reality, it became a masterclass in how good intentions can create terrible television. The list of returning talent was impressive: Karrion, Kross, Hit Row, Bronson Reed, and others who had shown potential before their releases. Fans were excited, and rightfully so. These were talented performers who deserved better opportunities than they'd received previously. But here's where Triple H's lack of creative vision became painfully obvious. Bringing talent back is only half the battle. The other half, the more important half, is knowing what to do with them once they return. Let's start with Karrion Kross, whose return should have been a slam dunk. Here's a performer with an intimidating presence, a unique character, and the kind of aura that should translate perfectly to main roster success. Instead, his reintroduction was botched from day one. Rather than rebuilding his mystique and allowing him to establish dominance, creative immediately booked him in ways that made him feel ordinary. The character work that made him compelling in NXT was abandoned in favor of generic heel tactics that could have been performed by anyone. Hit Row's return was even more disappointing. This was a group with natural chemistry, distinct personalities, and a connection to contemporary culture that WWE desperately needs. Yet their comeback felt forced and outdated from the moment they appeared. Instead of updating their presentation or finding fresh ways to showcase their talents, creative seemed to assume that simply putting them back on television would be enough. It wasn't. Bronson Reed represents perhaps the most frustrating example of wasted potential. Here's a performer with legitimate athletic ability, surprising agility for his size, and the kind of physical presence that should make him a natural monster heel. Yet his booking has been inconsistent and directionless, with feuds that start and stop without resolution and character development that goes nowhere. But here's the real problem. These failed returns reveal Triple H's over-reliance on nostalgia rather than creative innovation. Instead of developing new identities for these performers or finding fresh ways to present their talents, creatives seem to assume that simply bringing them back would generate sustained interest. That's not how entertainment works. The novelty of returns wears off quickly if there's no substance behind them. Fans might pop for the initial surprise, but if the follow-up doesn't deliver compelling storylines and character development, that excitement turns to indifference or even resentment. That's exactly what happened with most of these comebacks. What makes this even more frustrating is how these failed returns have cluttered the roster and diluted television time. Instead of strengthening WWE's programming, they've added confusion and reduced opportunities for performers who were already struggling to get meaningful screen time. The lesson here should be obvious: talent acquisition means nothing without creative vision. Triple H proved he could bring people back, but he failed to prove he knew what to do with them once they arrived. Here's something that should terrify WWE executives: their premium live events are becoming forgettable, and it's entirely due to Triple H's creative approach. These shows used to be appointment television, events that fans would plan their schedules around and talk about for weeks afterward. Now they feel like expensive episodes of weekly television with slightly better production values. Let me explain why this is happening and why it's so dangerous for WWE's future. Premium live events succeed when they feel special, when they deliver moments that can only happen on the biggest stages, and when they advance storylines in meaningful ways. Under Triple H, these events have become something much less exciting: checkpoints and never-ending stories that don't actually change anything. Take this year's Money in the Bank as a perfect example of this creative failure. This should have been a showcase event. Money in the Bank has historically been one of WWE's most exciting concepts, with briefcases that create instant main event storylines and unpredictable cash-ins that can change the entire landscape of the company. Instead, we got a card that felt like an afterthought. Half the matches lack proper build, which is creative malpractice for a premium event. When fans are paying premium prices, they deserve premium storytelling. They want to feel like every match matters, like every outcome could change the trajectory of their favorite performers. Instead, we got matches that felt thrown together to fill time slots. The Money in the Bank briefcases themselves have become props rather than game-changing opportunities. Remember when a MITB briefcase meant something? When holders felt like they had nuclear weapons that could be deployed at any moment to create shocking title changes? Now they're treated like participation trophies, held by performers who creative clearly has no real plans for. This reflects a much larger problem with Triple H's approach to these events. They don't feel consequential. Nothing truly matters unless it's WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, or SummerSlam. Shows like Survivor Series, which used to carry enormous weight and create brand warfare excitement, now feel like obligatory programming rather than must-see events. But here's what's really happening. Triple H's preference for long-term storytelling is actually working against the special nature of premium live events. When storylines are stretched across months or years, individual events stop feeling like climactic moments and start feeling like chapters in books that never end. That's not how successful entertainment works. Premium live events should be where storylines reach their peak intensity, where months of build-up pay off in spectacular fashion, and where new directions are established through shocking outcomes. Instead, we're getting events that feel like they're happening in a vacuum, where wins and losses don't seem to matter because everything will be reset by the next show. The most damaging part of this approach is how it affects fan investment. When events don't feel special, fans stop treating them as special. They stop planning viewing parties, stop discussing them passionately online, and stop feeling like they need to watch live. That's a death spiral for any entertainment product, but it's especially dangerous for WWE, which depends on these events for both revenue and cultural relevance. The evidence is overwhelming. Triple H's WWE has become a showcase of wasted potential, creative stagnation, and misplaced priorities. From storytelling that drags without purpose to talent that's criminally underutilized, from a neglected women's division to premium live events that feel ordinary, the problems run deeper than surface-level booking decisions. But here's what gives me hope. These problems are fixable. WWE has incredible talent, passionate fans, and resources that most promotions can only dream of. What they need is creative leadership that understands the difference between long-term storytelling and endless storytelling, between building stars and overexposing them, between respecting the audience's intelligence and insulting it with repetitive content. The clock is ticking for Triple H. Wrestling fans today have more options than ever before. AEW and JPW, Impact Wrestling, and countless independent promotions are all competing for the same audience. WWE's brand recognition and production values can only carry them so far if the creative product continues to disappoint week after week. Triple H needs to make a choice: continue down this path of creative conservatism and watch WWE's cultural relevance slowly erode, or embrace the boldness and risk-taking that made wrestling appointment television in the first place. The talent is there, the platform is there, and the audience is waiting. What's missing is the creative courage to give them something worth watching. The King of Kings once built his reputation on being the cerebral assassin who could adapt and overcome any challenge. Now he faces the biggest challenge of his career, proving he can create compelling television that honors wrestling's past while building its future. The question isn't whether he has the power to change course, it's whether he has the wisdom to recognize that change is desperately needed. WWE's future hangs in the balance, and Triple H holds the key. Let's hope he uses it before it's too late. What do you think about Triple H's creative direction? Are you seeing the same problems I've outlined, or do you think WWE is heading in the right direction? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on the current state of sports entertainment. If this analysis opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes in WWE, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've got more deep dives coming that will expose the truth about what's really going on in professional wrestling today. Trust me, you won't want to miss what I'm working on next.